The UES Montana moved through the cold darkness of space like a giant metal whale swimming through an endless ocean. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge watching the stars through the huge glass window that showed the universe outside their ship. His hands were behind his back and his face looked calm, but his eyes showed he was always thinking and watching for danger. The ship had been traveling for 3 months now since they left Earth to explore this part of space near Proxima Centauri. 800 crew members lived and worked inside the Montana, and most of them had never been this far from home before. Some were scared, but they trusted their captain and knew their job was important for all humans back on Earth. Lieutenant Amy Martinez sat at her station checking the weapons and defense systems. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panels as she made sure everything was working right. She had been Jake's tactical officer for 5 years, and they worked together like a perfect team. Amy came from Texas and still talked with a slight accent that reminded everyone of home. At the science station, Commander Lisa Bennett was studying the readings from their long-range sensors. She was looking for signs of planets that might have life or resources that humans could use. Lisa had been the top student at the Space Academy, and her job was to learn everything she could about this new part of the galaxy. Danny Rodriguez worked at the communications desk, trying to listen for any radio signals or messages that might come from other intelligent life forms. So far, after 3 months of searching, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks floating around distant stars. The bridge was quiet except for the soft humming of computers and the gentle whoosh of air moving through the ventilation system. Most of the crew was either sleeping or working in other parts of the ship during this night shift. Jake liked these quiet times because it gave him a chance to think about their mission and wonder what they might find out here in the unknown. Everything changed in 1 second when the alien ship appeared. There was no warning and no gradual approach from far away. One moment they were alone in empty space, and the next moment a massive alien vessel was floating right in front of them. The ship was twice as big as the Montana and covered with strange geometric patterns that seemed to move and shift when you looked at them directly. Amy's hands flew over her weapons controls as alarms started ringing throughout the ship. Red lights flashed on every wall, and the computer's voice announced that an unknown vessel had been detected at close range. Lisa stared at her sensors in shock because they showed no readings at all until the alien ship was already there. Whatever technology these aliens used to travel through space was far beyond anything humans had ever seen or imagined. Danny immediately started working to establish contact with the strangers. He tried every frequency and every type of signal that humans used for communication, but got no response. The alien ship just floated there silently, like it was studying them or deciding what to do next. Jake stepped forward and gave orders in a calm voice, even though his heart was beating fast. He told Amy to power up their defensive shields, but not to charge any weapons unless the aliens made a hostile move first. He wanted Lisa to start scanning the alien vessel to learn whatever they could about its technology and capabilities. The alien ship was beautiful in a strange and frightening way. Its hull seemed to be made of some kind of metal that changed color as the light from nearby stars hit it from different angles. The geometric patterns covered every surface, and they reminded Jake of ancient artwork from Earth, but much more complex and mathematical. For several minutes, both ships just floated there watching each other, like two wild animals meeting in the forest. Neither side made any aggressive moves, but both were clearly ready to defend themselves if necessary. Then the aliens made their move. Brilliant blue beams shot out from the alien vessel and swept across the entire length of the Montana from front to back. Every sensor on the bridge immediately started showing readings that made no sense. Energy levels spiked to impossible numbers and then dropped back to normal in seconds. Lisa's voice was filled with amazement and worry as she reported what was happening. The aliens were scanning them with technology that was incredibly advanced. The beam was reading everything about their ship, including the weapon systems, the engine design, the computer networks, and even the biological signatures of every crew member on board. Amy's tactical displays showed that the alien scan was somehow penetrating their shields and armor like they didn't exist at all. Every secret about human technology was being read and recorded by the strangers. Their entire database of military information, historical records, and personal files was being copied in minutes. Jake realized they were completely helpless against this kind of technology. If the aliens wanted to destroy them, there was nothing the Montana could do to stop it. Their most advanced weapons and defenses were like toys compared to what these beings could do. Danny kept trying to send messages to the alien ship asking them to identify themselves and explain their intentions. He used every language known on Earth and even tried mathematical formulas that any intelligent species should be able to understand. But the aliens remained silent and continued their scanning. The blue beam finally stopped after what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes. The alien ship's patterns seemed to glow brighter for a moment, and then everything became quiet again. Both vessels floated in space, watching each other while Jake and his crew waited to see what would happen next. What none of the humans realized was that in those few minutes of scanning, the aliens had learned things about humanity that would change the course of galactic history forever. The peaceful explorers on the Montana had no idea that their simple presence in space had just terrified an entire alien civilization. The scan had revealed not just their technology, but their history, their psychology, their culture, and their way of thinking about conflict and survival. What the aliens found in that data would soon spread panic through every peaceful species in the galaxy and start a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Jake stood on his bridge looking at the mysterious alien vessel and wondered if this moment would be remembered as the day humans finally made contact with other intelligent life. He had no way of knowing that the aliens were already planning to run away as fast as their advanced technology could carry them. Inside the alien vessel that humans would never learn to pronounce correctly, Senior Analyst Keth Moran stared at his display screen with growing horror. His 3 hearts were beating so fast he thought they might burst from his chest. The simple scan of the primitive human ship had revealed information that made his worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. Keth Moran had been analyzing alien species for over 200 cycles, and he had never seen anything like this before. Most species they encountered were peaceful traders or explorers like themselves. Some were more advanced technologically, and others were still learning to build simple spacecraft. But all of them followed the basic rules of civilized behavior that kept the galaxy safe and orderly. These humans were completely different. The scanning beam had penetrated deep into the human ship's computer systems and downloaded everything. Personnel files, military records, historical databases, training manuals, entertainment programs, and even personal diaries of the crew members. What Keth Moran found in that data made him question everything. He thought he knew about how intelligent life should develop. The humans called their ship a research vessel, but it carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Kinetic railguns that could fire projectiles at nearly the speed of light. Plasma cannons that burned hotter than the core of most stars. Nuclear missiles with yields that could crack the crust of a planet. And these were just their defensive systems for what they considered a peaceful exploration mission. But the weapons were not what truly terrified Keth Moran. It was the crew records that made his skin turn the pale color of absolute fear. Captain Jake Sullivan had fought in something called the Mars Colonial War, where over 50,000 humans had died in battles across an entire planet. The records showed he had personally led ground assaults against fortified positions and had been decorated for bravery under Fire 17 different times. Lieutenant Amy Martinez had destroyed 4 enemy spacecraft in single combat during what humans casually referred to as the asteroid belt conflicts. She had used weapons and tactics that would be considered war crimes by every civilized species in the galaxy, but the humans had given her medals for it. Commander Lisa Bennett looked like a peaceful scientist, but her psychological profile showed she had designed biological weapons that could wipe out entire populations. The humans had decided these weapons were too dangerous to use and had banned them, but only after testing them on uninhabited worlds to see how effective they were. Even their communications officer, Danny Rodriguez, had served in something called the Special Forces, where he had been trained to kill other humans with his bare hands if necessary. His file contained detailed reports of missions where he had infiltrated enemy positions and eliminated targets using methods that made Keth Moran physically sick to read about. The most disturbing part was that these humans considered all of this completely normal. Their entertainment programs were filled with stories about wars and conflicts. They had games where children pretended to fight battles and kill imaginary enemies. They told their young stories about heroes who solved problems through violence and were rewarded for it. The scan had also revealed human history going back thousands of years, and it was one long record of almost continuous warfare. They had fought with sticks and stones, then with metal weapons, then with gunpowder, then with machines that could kill thousands at once. They had dropped weapons on their own cities that turned entire areas into radioactive wastelands, and then they had continued living on the same planet afterward. They had fought wars in their oceans, on their land, in their air, and even in the space around their homeworld. They had fought over territory, resources, ideas, and sometimes just because they didn't like each other. And through all of this constant conflict, they had somehow managed to develop technology advanced enough to reach other star systems. Keth Moran called for Fleet Commander Zixathala to come and see the analysis. When the commander arrived and began reading the data, her reaction was even more extreme. She immediately ordered all crew members to stay away from the viewing ports that showed the human ship and began preparing emergency protocols. Commander Zixathala had lived for over 400 cycles and had helped establish peaceful contact with dozens of different species throughout the galaxy. She knew how to recognize dangerous civilizations and how to deal with them diplomatically, but she had never encountered anything like these humans before. The humans had turned warfare into an art form. They had academies where they taught young people how to fight more effectively. They had entire industries devoted to creating better weapons and more efficient ways of killing. They had military organizations that studied every battle they had ever fought, so they could learn from their mistakes and become even more deadly. What made it worse was that, according to their own records, the ship they were looking at was considered lightly armed by human standards. Their actual warships were apparently 10 times more heavily armed and carried crews that were trained from childhood to be professional soldiers. The scan had also revealed something that chilled both aliens to their core. The humans were not just violent toward other species. They seemed to enjoy competition and conflict among themselves. They had sports where they tried to physically harm each other for entertainment. They had business practices where they tried to destroy their competitors economically. They even had political systems where different groups fought for power using whatever methods they could get away with. Fleet Commander Zixathala made a decision that would echo throughout the galaxy. She immediately sent out a priority message to every allied species warning them about the humans. The message was brief but clear. Avoid human space at all costs. They are apex predators from a death world and extremely dangerous to all civilized life. Within hours, the message was being broadcast across subspace networks to every corner of known space. The Galactic Council of Peaceful Species received the warning and immediately called an emergency session. Representatives from 40 different civilizations gathered to discuss what should be done about this new threat to galactic peace and stability. Meanwhile, Keth Moran and Zixathala watched in growing panic as the human ship began moving toward their position. The humans were trying to establish contact and seemed curious about their new neighbors. But all the aliens could think about was getting as far away as possible from these terrifying creatures who had somehow managed to survive and thrive on a world where violence was the natural way of life. Captain Jake Sullivan noticed the change in the alien ship's behavior immediately. Where before the massive vessel had approached them with what seemed like confidence and curiosity, now it was slowly backing away from the Montana. The strange geometric patterns on its hull were flickering rapidly, and their colors had shifted from the soft blues and greens they had shown earlier to harsh reds and yellows that hurt to look at directly. Amy Martinez was monitoring the alien ship's energy signatures from her tactical station, and what she was seeing made no sense to her trained military mind. The alien vessel's power systems were spiking erratically, like they were preparing for either a massive weapons discharge or an emergency faster than light jump to escape the area. Jake walked over to Amy's station and looked at her readings. He had been a starship captain for 15 years and had learned to read the signs when another vessel was preparing to run from a fight. But they had not fired any weapons or made any threatening moves toward the aliens. In fact, they had been trying to establish peaceful contact since the moment the alien ship had appeared. Danny Rodriguez looked up from his communications console with a confused expression on his face. He had been monitoring the alien ship's transmissions, trying to understand their language and technology. What he was hearing now was completely different from the calm, organized signals they had been sending before. Danny reported that he was picking up fragments of alien transmissions that seemed to be sent on emergency frequencies to other ships or bases somewhere far away. The translation software was having trouble with the alien language, but it kept flagging certain words that roughly translated to terms like death world, apex predators, nightmare species, and immediate evacuation protocols. Lisa Bennett was running continuous scans on the alien vessel, trying to understand their technology and intentions. Her instruments showed that the aliens were powering up what appeared to be their faster-than-light drive systems. They were definitely preparing to leave the area as quickly as possible. Jake found this behavior completely puzzling because first, contact protocols from Earth Command were very clear about how to approach unknown alien species. Humans were supposed to maintain a respectful distance, avoid any aggressive actions, and try to establish peaceful communication before doing anything else. The Montana had followed these protocols perfectly. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Helen Carter had been quietly reviewing the crew's psychological profiles and medical records while listening to the reports from the bridge crew. As the ship's senior medical officer, she was responsible for understanding how contact with alien species might affect the mental health and behavior of the human crew members. But as she listened to the translations of the alien transmissions, Helen suddenly realized what had happened. The aliens had not just scanned their ship's weapons and technology. They had scanned everything, including the complete personnel files, medical records, psychological evaluations, and historical databases of every person on board the Montana. Helen's voice was quiet, but filled with understanding as she explained her theory to the bridge crew. The aliens had learned about human history, human psychology, and human culture through their scanning technology. To species that had evolved on peaceful worlds where conflict was rare or unknown, humanity's casual relationship with violence and competition would seem absolutely monstrous. The human crew members looked at each other as the realization hit them all at the same time. They had grown up in a world where conflict was normal and expected. Children played games that simulated warfare. Adults competed aggressively in business and sports. Nations maintained standing armies and prepared for wars that might never come. Entertainment programs were filled with stories about heroes who solved problems through fighting and violence. Jake thought about his own military record and realized how it must look to aliens from a peaceful civilization. He had fought in 3 different wars, had killed enemy soldiers with his own hands, and had been decorated for actions that required him to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure. What seemed like normal military service to him would look like the resume of a professional killer to beings who had never experienced warfare. Amy's tactical training included hand-to-hand combat, weapons expertise, and strategic planning for space battles. Her job was literally to figure out the most efficient ways to destroy enemy ships and kill their crews if necessary. She was good at her job and took pride in her abilities. But she was starting to understand why that might terrify aliens who had never needed to develop such skills. Lisa had studied military history and weapons technology as part of her scientific education. Her research had included work on defensive systems that could protect human colonies from attack. But her knowledge also included information about biological and chemical weapons that could eliminate entire populations if they were ever used against civilian targets. Even Danny, whose job was communications and diplomacy, had been trained in survival techniques and self-defense as part of his military service. He knew how to operate weapons, how to fight in zero gravity, and how to survive in hostile environments. These were basic skills that all human space travelers were expected to have. Dr. Carter explained that from the alien perspective, humans would seem like a species that had been shaped by constant warfare and competition. Every aspect of human culture, from their entertainment to their education to their technology, development was influenced by the need to survive in a dangerous and hostile environment. The bridge crew stood in silence as they processed this new understanding of their situation. They were not the peaceful explorers they thought they were. To the aliens, they were representatives of a warrior species from a death world where only the strongest and most violent could survive to adulthood. Jake made a decision to try one more. Time to establish peaceful contact with the aliens before they left the area. He ordered Danny to send a message explaining that humans came in peace and wanted to establish friendly relations with other intelligent species throughout the galaxy. But even as Danny sent the message, they could all see that it was too late. The alien ship's faster-than-light engines were charging up, and within minutes the massive vessel would disappear back into whatever corner of the galaxy it had come from. The aliens would carry with them a terrifying new knowledge about humanity that would soon spread panic throughout every peaceful civilization in known None of the humans on the Montana realized that their simple presence in this remote part of space had just started a chain of events that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The alien vessel known as the Harmony of Peaceful Contemplation engaged its faster-than-light drive with such urgency that it left energy distortions in space that would puzzle human scientists for years to come. Fleet Commander Zixathala had made the decision to abandon all normal departure protocols and escape from the human ship as quickly as their advanced technology would allow. Before jumping to faster-than-light speed, Zixathala broadcast a single message across all subspace frequencies that every civilized species in the galaxy monitored for emergency communications. The message was transmitted in 43 different languages and contained scanner data that supported every terrifying claim about the humans. The message was simple, but its impact would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Warning to all peaceful species, avoid human space at all costs. Death World apex predators detected. Extremely dangerous. Full scanner data attached. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols for entire human solar system. Within 6 hours of the transmission, the message had reached every major alien civilization within 100 light-years of Earth. Communication, networks that normally carried routine trade information, and scientific data were suddenly flooded with emergency alerts about the new threat that had emerged from a previously unknown corner of the galaxy. The Galactic Council of Peaceful Species had been meeting once every 10 years for over 2,000 years to discuss trade agreements, scientific cooperation, and the peaceful resolution of minor territorial disputes. Never in their long history had they convened an emergency session with less than 24 hours' notice. But the human threat was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Ambassador Velterran of the Gentle Wind civilization was the first to address the emergency assembly. His species had been exploring space for over 5,000 years and had helped establish first contact protocols with dozens of different alien races. He had seen the complete scanner, data from the human ship, and his normally calm demeanor was replaced by obvious fear and anxiety. Velterran displayed the human scanner data on massive screens that surrounded the council chamber. Representatives from 40 different species stared in horror as the information revealed the true nature of humanity. Here was a species that had somehow survived on a world where violence was the primary method of resolving conflicts. The humans had weaponized everything they could think of. Their so-called exploration ship carried kinetic weapons that could accelerate projectiles to nearly the speed of light. They had energy weapons that burned hotter than stellar cores. They possessed nuclear devices with yields measured in megatons that could vaporize entire cities in seconds. But the weapons were only the beginning of what made humans so terrifying. The scanner data revealed that human society was built around competition and conflict. They had economic systems where different groups tried to destroy each other financially. They had political systems where opposing parties fought for control using whatever methods they could justify. They even had entertainment where individuals competed to physically harm each other, while others watched for pleasure. Representative Colmeth of the Crystal Harmony spoke next, and his crystalline form was vibrating with frequencies that indicated extreme distress. His species had evolved on a world where cooperation was necessary for survival, and they had never developed concepts like warfare or murder. The idea that an intelligent species could thrive through violence was beyond their ability to comprehend. The scanner data showed that humans had fought wars continuously throughout their recorded history. They had developed increasingly sophisticated methods of killing each other, and had turned warfare into a science with schools and academies dedicated to military strategy. They had fought battles on land, in their oceans, in the air above their planet, and even in space around their homeworld. Most disturbing of all was the discovery that humans actually enjoyed conflict and competition. They had sports where the goal was to physically dominate opponents. They had games that simulated combat and warfare for entertainment. They told stories to their children about heroes who solved problems through violence and were rewarded for their actions. Ambassador Thais of the Floating Gardens presented analysis from her species' top psychologists and sociologists. The human psychological profiles revealed individuals who were trained from childhood to be aggressive, competitive, and capable of violence when necessary. Even their scientists and explorers had military training and were prepared to fight and kill if their missions required it. The council learned that the human ship they had encountered was considered lightly armed by human standards. Their actual military vessels were apparently 10 times more heavily weaponized and carried crews of professional soldiers who had dedicated their lives to becoming more efficient killers. Perhaps most frightening was the realization that humans had developed all of this technology and military capability while fighting primarily against other humans. They had never needed to defend against alien invasions or external threats. Their entire civilization had been shaped by conflicts with members of their own species who shared the same basic biology and psychology. Fleet Admiral Morgadeth of the Combined Defense Forces stood to address the Council with a proposal that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. He recommended that all peaceful species in the galaxy unite to establish a military quarantine around human space. The threat that humanity represented to galactic civilization was too great to ignore, or hope would resolve itself peacefully. Morgadeth began planning the largest military operation in the history of the galaxy. Representatives from every major civilization pledged ships and resources to create an armada that would surround human space and prevent these apex predators from spreading beyond their own solar system. 2,000 warships from 40 different species would be assembled and armed with the most advanced weapons that peaceful civilizations had ever developed. The fleet would establish a perimeter around human space and would destroy any human vessel that attempted to leave their home system. The Council members were confident that their combined technological superiority and overwhelming numerical advantage would be sufficient to contain the human threat. After all, the scanner data indicated that humans only had a few dozen primitive spacecraft and were just beginning to explore beyond their own solar system. What the Council did not understand was that their own peaceful nature had made them vulnerable to an enemy that had spent thousands of years perfecting the arts of war and conquest. The humans they planned to contain had been preparing for this kind of conflict their entire lives without even knowing it. 3 months after the alien fleet had departed from their encounter with the UES Montana, humanity had been very busy indeed. The moment Captain Jake Sullivan had reported the first contact incident to Earth Command, every military and scientific organization on the planet had gone into emergency preparation mode. Humans had learned long ago that when strangers showed up with superior technology and then ran away in fear, it usually meant trouble was coming. Admiral Sarah Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Enterprise, humanity's newest and most powerful warship that had been completed in record time using technology, reverse-engineered from the brief scans they had managed to take of the alien vessel. Around her, 200 human ships moved in perfect formation through space near the edge of the solar system. The human fleet was a mixture of converted civilian vessels, hastily upgraded military ships, and completely new designs that had been built using manufacturing techniques that would have been impossible just months earlier. Humanity had done what it always did when faced with a potential threat. They had adapted, innovated, and prepared for war. Lieutenant Mike Chen worked at the tactical station monitoring the long-range sensors that had detected the approaching alien armada while it was still days away from human space. The alien fleet was massive beyond anything humans had ever imagined, with over 2,000 ships of various sizes and configurations, representing dozens of different alien civilizations. Admiral Brooks studied the tactical display showing the positions of both fleets and felt a familiar calm settle over her mind. She had commanded human forces in 3 different conflicts and had learned that the moments before a battle were often the most important. Decisions made in the next few minutes would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or was destroyed by aliens who saw them as too dangerous to exist. The alien fleet had positioned itself at the very edge of the solar system in what was clearly a blockade formation, designed to prevent any human ships from escaping to other star systems. Their vessels were arranged in defensive patterns that showed they expected a long siege rather than a quick battle. Brooks opened a communication channel that would reach every ship in the human fleet as well as the alien armada. Her message was broadcast in multiple languages, including the basic mathematical concepts that any intelligent species should be able to understand. The transmission was brief and delivered in the calm professional tone that human military officers had used for centuries when facing overwhelming odds. This is Admiral Sarah Brooks of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered human space with a hostile force numbering over 2,000 vessels. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw from this system, or we will consider your presence an act of war against humanity. Aboard the alien flagship, Fleet Admiral Morgadath received the human transmission and felt a mixture of disbelief and contempt. The Death World barbarians were actually threatening. A fleet that outnumbered them 10 to 1 and possessed technology that should be far superior to anything these primitive warriors could have developed. Morgadath had spent months planning this operation and had assembled the largest military force in galactic history, specifically to deal with the human threat. Every ship in his fleet was crewed by beings from peaceful civilizations who had been forced to learn the arts of war for the first time in their species' history. The alien commander gave the order for all ships to prepare their weapons and advance toward the inner solar system. He intended to demonstrate the overwhelming power of civilized space and force the humans to surrender before any actual fighting became necessary. Surely even these violent apex predators would understand that resistance was futile when faced with such superior numbers. What happened next would be studied by military strategists throughout the galaxy for generations to come and would forever change how peaceful species viewed the concept of warfare. The humans did not wait for the alien fleet to finish powering up their weapons. They did not attempt to negotiate or find a diplomatic solution. They did not even pause to consider the overwhelming odds they were facing. They simply attacked with a precision and ruthlessness that stunned every alien commander who witnessed it. Human ships moved through space like predators that had been hunting together for thousands of years. They used tactics that the aliens had never seen before, because peaceful species had never needed to develop such methods of coordinated violence. Small groups of human vessels would suddenly appear from unexpected directions and overwhelm individual alien ships before disappearing back into the void. The humans had studied the brief scanner data from their first encounter and had designed their weapons specifically to exploit weaknesses in alien technology. Their kinetic projectiles punched through alien shields like they were made of paper. Their energy weapons burned through alien hull materials that had been designed to resist the gentle weapons of civilized warfare. But it was not just their weapons that made the humans so effective. It was their complete understanding of how to fight a battle in three-dimensional space using every advantage that speed, surprise, and aggression could provide. They had been preparing for this kind of conflict their entire lives without knowing it. Alien crews who had been trained in peaceful cooperation found themselves unable to respond effectively to human tactics that relied on split-second timing and ruthless efficiency. Their ships were destroyed or disabled before they could coordinate defensive actions with their neighboring vessels. When alien ships were disabled rather than destroyed, human boarding parties moved through the vessels with terrifying speed and captured them intact. The alien crews found themselves prisoners of beings who treated warfare as a normal part of existence, and who showed no hesitation in doing whatever was necessary to win. Within 6 hours of the first shots being fired, the great alien armada was either destroyed, captured, or fleeing back toward their home systems as fast as their faster-than-light drives could carry them. The few surviving commanders sent desperate messages to their governments, warning that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Admiral Brooks watched the last alien vessels disappear into faster-than-light travel and turned to her communications officer. She ordered him to send a message to Earth Command informing them that the solar system was secure, but that humanity would need many more ships very soon. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, and the universe would never be the same again.